I'm Geoffrey Bilder. I'm Crossref's Director of Strategic Initiatives. And today I'm going to do something that I once swore I'd never do. I'm going to do a live demo. Not only that, but a live demo that involves internet access. And the reason that I'm doing this is that a few months ago, Rachel Lammy, my colleague here, product manager on the Text Data Mining Initiative, and I were asked by the EU to come and explain to them from a researcher's perspective what text and data mining might look like using the Crossref APIs that we'd been developing. And this was a group of non-technical people, and they were curious because they felt that there was a bit missing to their understanding of what it was that researchers were going to do with text and data mining. And so they wanted us to show them something working. They didn't want slides. They were quite explicit about that. So with some trepidation, Rachel and I galloped off to Brussels and did this demo, and it seemed to be received fairly well. And so we repeated it for one or two of our publishers, and similarly it seemed to be received fairly well. So this has emboldened me to take a risk and to sort of up the adrenaline factor and do a live demo. And if this succeeds, you can expect that next year I'll be doing a demo featuring animals and children, the other two things that you're not supposed to ever include in anything live. So I'd like to start off just with this basic observation, which is that we, as the publishing industry, are confronted with this request by researchers to do text and data mining. And by and large, when we're asked by researchers for features or for functionality on our platforms, there are things that we can visualize. There are things that we can immediately understand the application of this. We would like to be able to have citations linked. We would like to have our alt metrics listed on the pages next to our articles. We would like to be able to navigate in sophisticated ways, search for sophisticated stuff, understand how people are looking at our content. We would like better manuscript tracking system features. All of these things are things that are, fairly easy for us to sort of grok. We understand it. It involves a user interface. We can go off and do that. The problem with text and data mining is that it's a little more amorphous. And the reason for this is that the people who are doing text and data mining are largely technical. They're essentially, even if they don't admit it themselves, most of them are programmers. And so what they're doing is very abstract and varies widely from researcher. And it's really kind of difficult to actually illustrate the kinds of things that they are doing to get a sense of the kinds of functionality that they want. There is no simple application. There is no simple front end that we can just say, this is our text and data mining solution with a nice user interface, go off and text and data mine. Largely what we do is we have to provide them with features that we would be typically providing for a programmer or a developer. And so I'm taking not only a risk in showing you something live, but I'm going to show you something that by and large you may hope you never ever have to see again in your lives because it's going to be technical. And I'll try and keep it at a high level and explain what's going on, but I do warn you ahead of time, there will be pointy brackets, there will be consoles, there will be stuff scrolling around. And I'll try and explain what's going on. But first, let me give you a little bit of background about the problem that we've been trying to address with the Crossref API for text and data mining. And the problem is simply this. Researchers are interested in text and data mining content, and that content is distributed across a lot of publishers. And when I say a lot of publishers, we sit there and we often think, and researchers do the same thing. They think of the top publishers they know of offhand, and usually that's the big publishers, and they think, how hard could it be? It could be 4 or 5 publishers, and that's fine. Except that if you look at our membership, it's not 4, 5, 10, 15 publishers. It's actually quite a few more publishers, right? It is a huge collection of publishers. And so all of a sudden you think, wow, the logistics of this are getting a little bit formidable, right? How do you go to all of these publishers and text and data mine their content? and the content that you might be interested in might in fact be distributed across all of these publishers, right? And it goes even further. That's our membership list. That's just our membership list, all right? Okay, so but you've got the same problem in that you've got a whole bunch of researchers out there, and they all want to text and data mine. So you start to see the combinatorial problem here. You have, X researchers and Y publishers, and you don't want them to have to negotiate bilateral agreements, right? Researchers find it completely impractical to negotiate multiple bilateral agreements across those thousands of publishers to allow them to do text and data mining, and they find it impractical actually to go off and deal either with multiple different APIs, that is an application programmer interface, or to screen scrape all that content. Now I'll tell you what happens at the moment, right? If a text and data miner wants to do this at the moment, what they do is they write software that goes and interprets the pages. This is called screen scraping, and tries to interpret the landing page and tries to figure out where you stash the piece. And this is just about the most abysmally fragile, resource-consuming way of text and data mining you can imagine. They're doing it out of necessity, but it's an incredibly tedious thing to do, and it certainly doesn't scale across thousands of publishers. Meanwhile, publishers have similar problems, right? They find it impractical to negotiate with n numbers of researchers, and both OA and subscription publishers also don't necessarily want to have all of these researchers screen scraping their websites or asking for specific API workarounds. So we have this problem that we're trying to solve amongst them. So all parties, of course, based on this observation, would probably benefit from having a standard API that worked across DOI, so that when they got to DOI, they don't have to worry about what publisher they're going to. All they have to do is look at the metadata for the DOI and see if that publisher supports the required elements that will allow them to do text and data mining. All they have to do is, and then they don't have to care about where the content is or what it is, they can write software to go off and try and access it, and if they have permission to access it, they will, and if they don't, if they're not a subscriber, for instance, they won't. So we've built a cross-publisher API for text and data mining. And it addresses two issues that we had not been able to address previously. And this requires two new sets of metadata. The first thing that we haven't addressed before is how do you get to the full text from the DOI? Because remember, the DOI at the moment generally resolves to a landing page. So what we need to be able to do is we need to be able to take them from the landing page to the full text, whether that's in PDF or XML or plain text or however it is you want to provide it. So we need a separate element that allows you to record in your metadata where the full text exists so that they can retrieve it automatically. All right? So the second thing that we need to deal with is they need some sort of indication, again, an indication that they can interpret automatically using computer software to determine what they're allowed to do with that. They need the licensing information. And in the simplest case, what we allow you to do is include a URL that points to the license for your content. And if it's a well-known URL for a well-known license, like a Creative Commons license, then a researcher can look at that and say, okay, fine, I understand what I'm allowed to do with a Creative Commons 3 license. And then they can decide, to text and data mine it. And similarly, if there are specialty licenses that appear out there, the researcher can create a whitelist and say, okay, I accept this license from the Journal of Psychoceramics, and I accept this license from the Journal of High Energy Metaphysics, but I don't accept this license from the Journal of Food. But either way, what we want to be able to do is allow publishers to record the licensing information explicitly in the metadata so that the researcher knows what they are allowed to do once they get the full text. So one of the things that I think we often miss and don't talk about enough is there are some other advantages to DOIs above and beyond the ability for them to provide a unified user interface to multiple publishers. And I do want to talk a little bit about these because they're often glossed over. When you think about what, for instance, a canonical text and data miner might be doing, they may be doing something like saying, okay, I would like to take this large corpus of data and I would like to see how often the following phrase is used over a period of time and how that changes. And that could be, you know, the name of a protein or an antibody or whatever, but this is just, you know, a toy example. But imagine what happens if they start double counting. What happens if they can't actually easily determine that several documents are in fact different versions of each other? Or that they have to go through some magic in order to determine that this HTML version of a document is in fact the equivalent of this PDF version of document. One of the things that the DOI does, if the document has a DOI, is it allows them to see, I've actually seen this document before, I'm not going to double count things in this document. The other thing that it does is it allows them to determine the provenance of the document. That is, who published it, who's responsible for it, possibly even what it's gone, what and data mine, but they only want to text and data mine the peer-reviewed literature. The identifier will allow them to actually look at the metadata and get some sort of an idea of whether or not this literature that they're looking at is peer-reviewed. Reproducibility, this is another thing. Now, if somebody, for instance, does text and data mine a huge corpus of literature, it might be impractical for them to go off and actually send that whole huge corpus of literature to somebody else to text and data mine. But if they have the identifiers for the documents, what they can do is provide them with the identifiers of the documents that composed the corpus that they were actually looking at. And finally, the last thing is updates. You can imagine that as content is corrected, as content is retracted, withdrawn, obviously a lot of this could have a big impact on the kinds of conclusions that people draw from text and data mining the literature. So there are a number of advantages above and beyond providing a standard API that the DOI confers for researchers doing text and data mining. So before I launch into this very risky demo, I want to talk a little bit about the text and data mining workflow. And this is going to be, again, a bit of a caricature. You know, if there's one thing that I can emphasize is that the kinds of things that text and data miners want to do, even though we lump them in this term, text and data mining, can vary wildly, even within a particular discipline, okay? And this is part of the problem with actually kind of understanding the researcher perspective. So what I'm describing here is a kind of a caricature workflow, but it explains some of the major steps that a researcher would take, grossly simplified, but it gives you a flavor of what would happen during this process. So the first thing, and this is often sort of, you know, if you read Wired and enough Kevin Kelly, you think maybe this step is skipped, right? Lots of people talk about, big data, text and data mining. We don't have to have theories. We don't have to have ideas. We'll just, you know, look through masses of data and come up with answers to things that we didn't know we had questions about beforehand. But this is, like a lot of stuff that Kevin Kelly talks about, rubbish. Largely, if you're looking at data, you have some sort of a problem in mind. You've defined some sort of an issue that you're trying to address. And, of course, if you've done that, one of the things that you have to do is you have to identify what literature is actually relevant to the problem that you're trying to address. If you're trying to address something having to do with the analysis of the use of, you know, transgenic animals in biological experiments over a period of time, it doesn't make much sense for you to be mining the sociology literature or the humanities literature. At the very least, you want to narrow it down to literature or the physics literature for that matter. At the very least, you want to narrow down the corpus to a particular set of literature. So defining the corpus is actually an important part. And part of that will involve discovery, trying to identify the kinds of journals, the kinds of data sets, and so on and so forth that you actually want to look at. And then the identification of those things within that corpus that can be accessed and that you can text and data mine and that have the appropriate license. So the definition of the corpus and and so on is an important step in this. Once you've defined that, then you can go about the process of downloading the required full text so that you can use whatever tools you've developed in-house, whatever strategies and mechanisms and programs that you've written to actually analyze that corpus. And these items in bold are the kind of the thing that I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk a little bit about discovery, but I'm going to emphasize that Crossref isn't a primary discovery platform. We have the ability to search on metadata, but that's not adequate for a lot of text data mining systems. So we are largely relying on researchers using third-party discovery systems to collect their corpus and to collect their the identifiers that they want to mine. But we'll give you a little demo with a sort of a fake discovery phase. Identification of the subset that can be accessed. Obviously, not all of those DOIs are going to be licensed appropriately. Not all of them are going to have full text links. And so you want to be able to determine which ones you can actually process. And then downloading the identified corpus. And for bonus points, if we can, I might do a little fake text data mining using an open text data mining API that specializes in entity extraction. All right? So now we get to the tricky part, the demo. And up here you'll see a URL that actually points to a document. This will be on the last slide as well, so don't panic if you don't get it now. That points to a document that we have online, which is a sort of a tour of a text and data mining scenario. And that's actually the document that I'm going to be working from here. So I'm going to explain a few things about what's going to go on here. First thing is I'm going to get out of the slideshow, and I'm going to go to this document, this tour document, and I'm going to scroll through it, and you're going to see a bunch of sort of commands, API calls, which I'm going to execute some of to illustrate how they work and what they look like. And I'm going to be flipping back and forth between executing these commands and looking at these documents, and I'll try and explain what's going on during each step. Okay, so we're executing the actual slideshow, and this is the thing that you all fear, right? I'm showing you horrible, garbled, technical text. This is a command line. This is what programmers often use for, writing software and for patching together tools. And I've written a bunch of sort of little tools that make use of the Crossref API and that allow you to do things like identify what licenses apply to a particular set of documents, what publishers there are, do some searches, download PDFs, that kind of thing. And as I said, we have a document here, which I will show you, which is that document that was pointed at by that URL. And this is a Crossref TDM API tour. And that's online, and you can all access it, and this is effectively what I'm going to go through. Now, I'm going to take a tiny little bit of a detour here, because I want to say something up front, because what I'm going to do is going to look like an unbelievable number of steps, and it's going to look incredibly complicated. But one of the things I want to emphasize is that a lot of the things that I'm doing step by step here are things that eventually will be wrapped up in the tools that a researcher writes. They'll be wrapped up in a little set of tools, and they won't actually, once they've done this, they will not see probably 99% of these steps. And I want to, in order to sort of illustrate this point, I want to show you something that a lot of people, if you're not a programmer, something that a lot of people don't see. This is a web page, all right? And it's a +1 article. And one of the things, if you look at this, you think, wow, this is, quote, a web page. It's not a web page. What it is, in fact, is it's an amazing collection of files and subfiles, style sheets, images, text regions, and so on and so forth, all of which are fetched independently by the browser and assembled and displayed to you at the last minute. And in order to illustrate this, I'm going to go into developer mode here, and I'm going to go and look at this network tab, and I'm going to reload this page. And if our network is actually functioning, okay, you'll start seeing all of these little things appearing down at the bottom of the page that say, get something, and a lot of these things are being canceled for some reason. Let me just quickly make sure I've got an actual connection. And as luck would have it, it looks like the connection is down. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, anticipating that something like this might happen, I have backup files sitting here on my local hard drive, which I can actually show you to give you a sense of what's what you would see if we actually executed these commands. But in this case, if the network were working, which it seems to not be, and this will teach me.
Jeff,
Yeah,
want to quickly try for my phone tethering?
I could try that. Yep. Password. Yeah. Ah, look at that. All right. So, so what you're seeing here actually is a whole bunch of things appearing down at this bottom, in this bottom pane. And what that is in fact showing is that this browser is going off and doing, I think the count, you'll see it's gone up to 99 requests. I think it probably topped separate requests for separate files to assemble this web page. That's what your browser does. You never see it. It never occurs to you that this kind of thing is going on. And the reason that I'm showing you this is that effectively, one of the things that tools do, the libraries that developers do, is they're going to wrap up a lot of the things that I'm going to show you into toolkits that will abstract away a lot of these details so that they won't have to do a lot of the things that I'm showing you. But nonetheless, it's helpful to understand what those tools are doing and what's going on. So if you look at this Crossref text and data mining API tour, there are some technical notes. One of the technical notes, and this is important if you look at it, is that the return format for the things that I'm going to ask for are designed for programmers, and they're not particularly readable. So, for instance, if I come over here, this is the return data from one of the commands that I'm going to execute, and it looks like hell. One way to sort of fix that is to actually install one of these two plugins called JSON View that allows you to take that mess of garbage that I showed you just now and display it in a slightly less messy way like this. So this actually shows you that that blob of data was in fact a structured message that contains a whole bunch of metadata that was retrieved from the Crossref system, and you can scroll through it and see what that metadata was. And it's not exactly readable, but it's certainly more readable than the stuff that I showed you before. So what I wanted to quickly show is if you go through here, we have a whole bunch of commands. Identifying a corpus, the first stage. So for instance, you might want to find out what's in the Crossref system, okay? And in order to do that, you might want to say, see what members it has. You might want to look at the first 100 members. And these are actually API calls. They look like normal web URLs, and they are. But if you actually put them into your system, you'll see that what they'll return is data. So this is a list of the first 100 members of the Crossref, And you can actually go through the metadata, and you can see who the members are. You can see a little bit about information about what kind of metadata they collect. You can see their identifier, and so on and so forth. As you go through this list, you can see the next 100 members. You can see how many DOIs Crossref has at the moment. And so if we go back over here and put in that, this gives you a real-time, near real-time count of the number of DOIs that we actually have. If Joe's phone will cooperate, here we go. Yep. So just over 70 million. Big milestone for us. And you can go through this document and you can see, okay, let's see what types of articles they have. So we'll list that we have journals and conference proceedings and so on. Content types we have. It'll show that we have articles and proceedings. It will see, you can see how many journal ones and so on and so forth. And as you go through here, you can start looking at the results. And this is where you actually start saying, okay, let's construct a fake little discovery phase where I'm interested actually only in documents in Crossref that contain the word blood in the metadata somewhere, okay? Now this could be a person's surname, it could be in the title, it could be in the journal title, but the total results here is 390,752 have some mention of blood in the metadata. And then what you can start doing is you can say, okay, let's look at one of the records that was returned by that query for the word blood. And I think in this case we'll actually see that there's this article here, Creative Commons licensed, and it has a whole bunch of interesting stuff in it. It's, first of all, recorded by Hindawi. It has license information in here showing that it's Creative Commons licensed, and it has a link to the full text saying that the PDF is at this location. So this metadata right there actually gives you the information that you need as a researcher to determine, yes, I am allowed to text and data mine this content. And if we go through this whole process, eventually you can actually say, okay, well, actually, what I would like to do is I would like to show you all the articles that you have that have a license, and it will show you that we have just over 1 million articles now with a license. And you can start to combine these things. And at the end here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, why don't you show me all the articles that you have in the system that have a license, have a full text link, and contain the word blood, and limit it to 884 because I don't have much time. And it's gone off and it's actually collected that. So now you have a corpus. You know that these documents have the word blood someplace in the metadata. You know that they have license information, and you know that they have a full text link that you can follow. And finally, what you can do is you can actually download this JSON file. And if we pop back out to this little directory, I can say that I want to, I can show you the JSON file in question. I thought I could. So anyway, I'll show you this, and that's the file basically that I downloaded. And then what you can actually do is you can take that JSON file, and I've created a subset here, which you can see up there, which is Hindawi, and I can write a simple little program that says, okay, what I'd like to do is I'd like you to actually go and get the full text of the articles in question. And again, if I pass it this this file, it should go off, and it should start looking at that and connecting to the publisher, seeing if the license is one that they whitelisted, that they say that allows them to text and data mine, and then it goes off and it actually downloads the PDF locally to the drive. And I hate to think what Joe's phone bill is going to be like after this. Near 884 documents later. But what it's doing is it's going off and it's actually downloading these things to the local hard drive so that they can run this through a text and data mining analysis system. And I'm actually going to stop this here so that Joe has a chance. Well, I'm going to try and stop this here so that Joe has a chance of having a decent phone bill. And what I want to do here is I want to show you that in the downloads directory, you'll start seeing these PDFs appearing slowly as this thing comes down. Now, the next steps that a text and data miner would probably take is they would turn these into XML, and then they'd actually start analyzing the text using whatever software they have that's available. Now, I should note that in this case, I'm just downloading PDFs. The publisher could provide XML if they wanted to, or they could provide plain text. They could provide any number of formats. But basically, what all of these things do, these are the steps that a text and data miner uses They can look at our metadata. They can find out what identifiers match the criteria that they have, which is, contains certain words or comes from certain journals or is from certain authors or from certain publishers. They can determine whether it has a license that is acceptable that allows them to do text and data mining, and they can determine where the full text is, and if they have a subscription to the full text, they can download the PDF to their local hard drives and then start applying whatever tools they want to that system. So I've just about hit 30 minutes. I know that was a bit of a technical deep dive, but I'm happy to, I hope that it made a bit of sense to you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody might have about the process or about the tools or about anything that I've shown you. So, thank you. Any questions? Yes?
So are you saying you can use this API file on any Crossref member? I know, for example,
Right.
Elsevier developed their own.
Right.
Would you use this their side?
So actually, if you look at the results here, So Elsevier, for instance, one of the things I should point out is that yes, any publisher can do this, but in order to do it, you have to submit 2 key bits of metadata: licensing information and links to full text. Now, publishers are starting to do this in a real way. We've just launched this already. We have over 1 million records that have both a full text link and a license in them, predominantly driven by Hindawi, but also now by Elsevier. And what I'm showing you here, when you can just barely see in there, is Elsevier is in fact depositing this information as well. So they're, and Chris Shillem will be here tomorrow, but we understand that their system is, they're planning on making this compatible so that people can actually follow the DOIs, and if they have the permissions and so on and so forth, they can text and data mine the Elsevier literature as well.
So as a researcher, I can only get access to those publishers who have already deposited with you the full text license thing.
The license and the link to the full text. So this is one of the things that we're trying to encourage all of our members to do. It's just extra metadata. If you deposit this metadata, you can say to those researchers who are asking you, is your text and data mining, your system enabled for text and data mining, you can effectively say yes, and it involves minimal work on your part. It requires you to basically use the access control system that you already have, but also provide the link that you already have someplace that links directly to the full text in whatever format you want, PDF or XML or plain text or whatever. So it's just 2 pieces of metadata that you need to deposit to enable this to your publishing house to participate in this. Question in the back? Yep.
Yeah, Jeff.
Hey.
This is great. This is a great, first step in connecting people who want to mine our content. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on a standardized file format, or a standardized form that we can create specifically for text and data mining across the industry.
So in general, I think I'm hugely skeptical of such efforts. And the reason is that I have a lot of experience participating in efforts like that. For instance, the Text Encoding Initiative and others. And the problem comes down to this. A lot of the things that we think are mere matters of people not using the same word actually tend to turn out to be deeply theoretical differences between people. So if you go, there's a certain level of almost trivial markup that you can provide. That is the structural markup. Things like this is the title, this is a section, this is the section head, these are the references. Into any kind of semantic information, those tend to actually be theory laden, and you start to have huge debates about what it means that something is a stanza or something like that. That's a humanities example, but and so they tend to get bogged down very quickly. And if you look at what researchers are doing now, there's another problem, and that is that a lot of these things can be lossy, right? So for instance, you might get a manuscript in which lots of things, names of transgenic animals and so on and so forth are italicized and so on. And when you send that out to be marked up or something like that, that actually gets translated into simply italic or possibly even just not marked up at all. And so they can also be lossy processes when you try and move to a common ETD. If you look at what's happening at the moment, researchers are saying, give me the, a lot of them are just saying, give me the PDF and I'll work it out, rather than risk the idea that you might give me minimal XML that actually manages to lose a lot of data that I might be able to infer from the PDF.
So PDF might be since it's kind of the standard.
I think that I would encourage people to at least, so it's not an either or. You can provide PDF and XML, and you can provide XML later when you have it. So if you're trying to address the need now, obviously waiting until there's a grand unified schema and then adopting your production processes to do that's going to take a long time. I'd strongly recommend that at the very least you start allowing them to either get the PDF, or if you don't want them to have the PDF, the plain text of the article, and provide that, because they're the two easiest things to do. Any other questions? All right, I'm digging into Kirsty's time. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to grab me after the session, and I'd be happy to answer any questions I can. And thank you, Joe, for the use of your phone. Do let me know what your bill is.